The Galactic Assembly Hall was one of the most secure and advanced places in the universe, built in the heart of neutral space and surrounded by protective energy fields that shimmered like blue fire. And on that day, every seat was filled with beings of all shapes, sizes, and colors, each one representing a different world, each one buzzing with excitement and curiosity because Earth's representative was scheduled to speak, and humans, though late arrivals to the assembly, had quickly become the most important species in the council due to their strange mix of logic and emotion, their wild creativity, and their ability to solve problems that no other species could even understand. So when Ambassador Elena Meyer stepped onto the central platform, dressed in her simple black Earth uniform with the silver crest of unity on her chest, a hush fell over the entire chamber, thousands of minds leaning forward at once, and even the air itself seemed to still as she looked around the room with calm eyes and spoke words that would change the course of galactic history forever, saying, "As of this moment, Earth formally withdraws from the Galactic Assembly," and for several seconds no one reacted because it made no sense. Like hearing the sun had decided not to rise anymore, or gravity had stopped working. But then the confusion began to spread like ripples across water as ambassadors blinked, whispered, or translated what they had just heard, wondering if it was a joke, a misunderstanding, or perhaps some kind of complex negotiation tactic. Yet Eleanor stood firm, her face unreadable, her voice steady, and when a six-eyed diplomat from the Vortex cluster stood and asked why, she only said, "The reasons are Earth's alone," before pressing a small device and vanishing in a shimmer of light, leaving behind stunned silence and an echo that would not fade. And within hours, Earth's official channels across the galaxy went dark. Their embassies emptied, their ships recalled, and their networks offline, causing panic among those who had relied on human advisors, human engineers, and human diplomats to keep things balanced, especially in the outer sectors, where tension always ran high, and across the stars, wild rumors took shape. Some claimed Earth had discovered a threat too dangerous to share. Others whispered that humans had secretly advanced beyond physical space and no longer needed planets, while a few suggested they had simply grown tired of galactic politics and decided to walk away. But no one really knew the truth, and the mystery only grew deeper when attempts to contact Earth directly failed, as the planet was now wrapped in a glowing defense field that defied every known scanner and communication wave, blocking even quantum messaging. And even the most powerful artificial minds in the galaxy could not break through, leaving the assembly in chaos and confusion, with emergency meetings held every hour and leaders demanding answers that did not exist. While trade routes began to slow, agreements began to falter, and the idea that the galaxy had taken humanity for granted became harder and harder to deny, because without humans, something felt missing, not just in politics or economics, but in the very way things worked. And some minor systems began to report strange technical errors in devices designed with human input, while others noticed rising tensions among species who had once relied on human mediators to keep peace, and all the while, the image of Elena. Meyer's calm face and simple words played again and again across every screen, her voice always the same, always final, always just beyond understanding. And in the days that followed, a quiet fear began to creep into the assembly, not because Earth had left, but because no one knew why. And deep down, many began to worry that Earth might have seen something coming, something the rest of the galaxy had missed, and that their sudden departure was not a rejection, but a warning, and the silence they left behind was not just absence, it was a signal. The galaxy had never been quiet, not until Earth left the assembly without a reason, and now that silence was spreading, faster than any signal or ship, reaching even the darkest corners of space where news traveled slow and trust traveled slower, and everywhere the same questions repeated. Why did Earth leave? What did they see? And were they ever coming back? Because their departure was not just political. It was personal for many who had worked with humans, depended on them, or simply admired the strange species that always asked, "What if?" when others accepted, "What is?" And now without them, things were falling apart in ways no one expected, starting with the outer trade lanes, where massive fleets once moved smoothly with human-built navigation hubs. But now, those same hubs flickered, glitched, and sometimes gave false coordinates that led ships off course, into empty space or worse, toward ancient hazards best left alone, and when teams were sent to fix the systems, they found nothing wrong. Every wire in place, every AI functioning, but the failures kept happening, almost as if something invisible was pulling threads from the inside, and in the central sectors where the assembly once met daily, chaos replaced order because humans had often played the role of peacekeepers, mediators, or the quiet ones who asked a single question that made both sides stop shouting. And without that presence, arguments grew sharper, misunderstandings turned into threats, and old rivalries that had been kept under control for decades began to surface again like forgotten ghosts, while rumors flew faster than ships. Some said Earth had ascended to a higher form of existence and no longer cared about the material universe. Others believed they had detected something dangerous in the fabric of space-time and were preparing in silence, and a few whispered that the humans were planning something, not out of anger, but as part of some greater idea, too big for others to understand. And in the middle of this storm was a young alien named Kirill, a scholar from the archive worlds who had spent years studying human culture, language, and behavior, fascinated by their music, their emotions, their fiction, especially their fiction, which no other species seemed to use the same way. And while the galaxy panicked, Kirill quietly went from world to world, collecting every human artifact he could find, from books and stories to images and songs, trying to find a pattern, a message, something they might have left behind. And the more he studied, the more he noticed that humans often spoke about endings that were really beginnings, stories where walking away was the first step toward something greater. And though others laughed at his work, calling it useless or sentimental, Kirill kept going, believing that fiction might hold the truth the assembly had missed, because humans had always used stories to prepare themselves and others for what came next. And maybe this time, they were using silence as their story, one that could only be understood by those who listened carefully. And while Kirill searched for meaning, the galaxy continued to shift in small but strange ways. Energy. Readings changed in the deep void, where no life had ever been. Planets once stable began to wobble slightly in their orbits, and old machines started showing errors that hadn't existed before. Like the very rules of the universe were bending just a little, just enough to be noticed by the most careful minds. And in every case, someone eventually said, "This didn't happen when Earth was here," and though it sounded foolish, more and more people began to believe it, because maybe it wasn't just diplomacy and science the humans brought. Maybe it was something deeper, something they didn't even realize they gave to the galaxy, like a stabilizing force that kept things balanced simply by being present. And now that they were gone, the universe was reacting, not with violence, but with unease, as if it too was wondering what had changed. And in the halls of the assembly, leaders who once dismissed human influence began to reconsider, reopening files, listening to old recordings, and in one case even sending a quiet team to try contacting Earth again. But every signal was ignored, every ship turned back by Earth's silent barrier that pulsed with soft light and quiet purpose. And though nothing was aggressive, it was clear. Earth did not wish to speak, not yet, and that silence was louder than any words could have been, echoing through systems, carried by traders, diplomats and wanderers, until even the smallest Species in the smallest corners of space knew the humans were gone and had taken something with them that no one could name, but everyone could feel. And as Kirill sat alone in an old archive room, surrounded by human books filled with impossible stories, he began to think that maybe Earth hadn't left because of something external, but because they had discovered something within themselves, something that told them it was time to step back and let the rest of the galaxy face its own future. And maybe, just maybe, they were still watching, waiting to see what others would do in their absence, not out of pride, but out of hope. And in that moment, Kirill understood something simple yet profound. The humans weren't gone forever. They were giving the universe a chance to grow without them, a chance to become stronger, wiser, and more creative, just as they had once done alone on their small blue world. And that realization spread slowly, person to person, planet to planet, until the panic began to fade, not completely, but enough for people to start asking different questions. Not why did they leave, but what will we do now? And that shift, though small, was the beginning of something new, a quiet echo of humanity still moving through the stars. Across the stars, things were breaking in ways no one could explain, not with logic, not with science, and not with experience. Because systems that had worked for centuries without fail were now showing strange behaviors. Navigation grids spinning off course, diplomatic AIs freezing mid-sentence, and entire sectors experiencing random bursts of static across communication. Bans. But whenever someone tried to trace the problem, they found nothing. Only that each incident shared one quiet truth. It began after Earth left the assembly, and soon, even those who had doubted Earth's importance began to feel uneasy. Especially when gravity fields in high-traffic stations started pulsing out of rhythm, and starships reported dreams, yes, dreams, shared by crews of different species, showing images of Earth's oceans, cities, and a silent sky with no stars. And though most scientists dismissed it as stress, a few started to whisper about something deeper, something beneath the surface, because what if Earth had not just withdrawn politically, but also removed something unseen, something that had been stabilizing the galaxy without anyone realizing it, a kind of influence that wasn't in laws or machines, but woven into the very shape of thought. And this idea became harder to ignore when ancient planetary archives began unlocking files no one had accessed before. Files left behind by human thinkers who had visited those worlds long ago. Files filled with strange diagrams, hopeful messages, and predictions. Not about war or disaster, but about change. As if Earth had seen a moment like this coming, and among those who noticed was Kirill, the alien scholar who had once been called foolish for studying human stories, but who now found those stories lining up too perfectly with reality. And he began collecting incidents, comparing them with lines from old human books, and found something that made his blood freeze. Some stories had described events exactly like what was happening now, down to the minute glitches in star maps, and the feelings of drifting silence. And that meant either it was coincidence or humans had known more than anyone thought possible. And either way, it made Kirill wonder if Earth had truly left, or if they had simply stepped back to see what happened when they weren't holding the galaxy together. Not as rulers, not even as leaders, but as an invisible thread running through everything. And that thought became more real when a star near the Luris belt began to dim. Not die, just dim slightly, but enough that its light pulses slowed down, confusing the entire sensor network. And when ships arrived to scan it, they found a single satellite orbiting the star, old human-made, still sending a soft signal that said nothing more than "hold the line," over and over in hundreds of languages, and no one knew what line it meant or who the message was for. But it made everyone uneasy, especially the elders of the Drixon Accord, who remembered how humans had once stabilized the politics between feuding moons just by sharing stories of their own wars and mistakes, teaching lessons without forcing change. And now those moons were on the brink of battle again, not because of hatred, but because without Earth's guidance, they no longer knew how to talk, how to listen, and in other places, similar cracks formed. Scientific councils broke into arguments over ethics, deep space miners began refusing to enter areas once mapped with human help, and the most advanced translation systems in the galaxy began misreading certain emotional phrases, as if something subtle was missing, something that allowed species to truly understand each other, and the pattern became clear to more and more minds. Earth had not given the galaxy technology alone, they had given something else, something that could not be measured or replaced. Perspective, empathy, creativity, and now that those gifts were gone, or at least hidden, the universe itself was starting to feel colder, not in temperature, but in purpose, and while some still believed Earth had acted selfishly, others began to understand that perhaps humanity had stepped back to allow others to grow. Like a teacher who lets their students walk alone for the first time, and yet there was fear too, because some believed that Earth had seen a danger ahead, something only they could detect, and their withdrawal was not a test, but a shield, and perhaps their silence was the only thing keeping something darker at bay. And as this fear spread, Kirel continued his work, diving deeper into the digital libraries left behind by humans, especially one strange archive marked only with the name Project Quiet Anchor, which included records of experiments in thought-driven energy fields and emotional harmonics, ideas that most species considered impossible, but which humans had pursued with strange success. And the more he read, the more Kirel realized that Earth might have created something not to control the galaxy, but to protect it quietly from forces no one else could feel. And now, with that silent power gone, reality itself was beginning to shift, slowly but surely, like a vast machine missing its smallest but most important gear. And that left one final question hanging in the hearts of millions. If Earth truly held something that made the galaxy work, what would happen if they never came back? And even more frightening, what if they were waiting for the galaxy to realize it on its own, before it was too late? While the galaxy struggled to understand the silence Earth had left behind, a quiet race began across the stars, not one of ships speeding through wormholes or armies clashing on moons, but a race of minds, thinkers, scientists, and diplomats, all trying to be the first to find a way to speak to Earth again, not to demand answers, but simply to ask why. And across the Galactic Assembly, powerful governments, hidden research groups, and curious individuals alike began hunting through every old message, every forgotten transmission, and every trace left by humanity's presence, hoping for a code, a key, or a signal that could pierce the glowing field now wrapped around Earth like a silent shell. And deep within a cold asteroid base near the rim of known space, a young technician named Rael, born of a species known for silence rather than speech, discovered an old human artifact buried in a cargo ship left floating in a derelict zone. A small, simple-looking sphere etched with Earth's old languages, and when Rael activated it, a soft voice began to speak, not in commands but in questions, asking, "What do you seek?" And Rael, startled, answered not with logic but with feeling, saying, "I miss them." And the sphere responded with warmth, whispering, "Then listen." And it showed no map, no data stream, only images, memories, dreams and thoughts humans had once recorded for the universe. And Rael realized this was not a machine for solving problems, but for remembering connection, and word of this spread fast, reaching others who had once worked closely with humans, people and beings who remembered their kindness, their stubbornness, and the strange way they always found a third option when no one else could. And slowly the race shifted from science to memory, from force to understanding, and yet not all sought Earth for peace. Some feared that if Earth stayed away, their own power would weaken. And so, a secret coalition of elites known as the Prime Lattice began building a device designed to force communication by breaking through Earth's barrier. A weapon masked as a research probe, using energy frequencies never tested before, and, while they worked in shadows, Chiral continued his search in the light, guided by fragments of human stories that hinted Earth's silence was not a retreat, but a preparation. And in one forgotten station orbiting a dead planet, he found a room filled with children's art sent to Earth during the first years of humanity's time in the assembly, and on the back of one drawing, a picture of Earth holding hands with a dozen alien shapes, was a phrase written in shaky letters. "When we're quiet, we're listening," and those words echoed in Kirell's mind like a warning and a clue, and he sent that message to the archive worlds, hoping someone would understand it before it was too late, because the Lattice's machine was nearly ready, and their scientists believed they could tear open a channel to Earth using focused emotional dissonance, a strange method that involved capturing confusion, fear, and sorrow in waves and turning them into pressure against Earth's field. But they did not realize the field was not a wall, it was a mirror, and whatever they pushed against it might return with equal force. And as Kirell rushed to stop them, others moved in secret as well. Diplomats sending soft messages of apology, engineers crafting messages built from music rather than words, and even poets, yes, poets, transmitting verse into the void, hoping Earth might hear feeling if not logic. And while most of the galaxy watched in fear or confusion, a growing number began to understand that this was not about pulling Earth back. It was about proving they were ready for a new kind of connection, one built not on need or politics, but on trust. And finally, the day came when the Prime Lattice activated their device, firing a massive pulse of emotion-charged energy directly at Earth's barrier and across the stars. Systems blinked, lights dimmed, and stars shimmered oddly as the pulse echoed through space, reaching the blue world wrapped in quiet. But instead of breaking through, the energy scattered, reflected, and returned, not as a weapon, but as a wave of raw memory, flowing into every lattice system and revealing everything Earth had once given, everything they had once done quietly behind the scenes, wars they had stopped, diseases they had cured, disasters they had prevented by simply asking questions others hadn't. And as those memories poured through the network, the device shut down, not broken but humbled, and across the galaxy, for one long moment there was silence, not empty, but full of understanding. And then from Earth's surface, a single beam of light rose into space, carrying no words, only one sound, a heartbeat steady and calm. And that sound reached every ship, station, and planet still listening, and many wept, not because Earth had returned, but because it hadn't turned away. It had simply been waiting to see if the galaxy would choose fear or hope, and in choosing to reconnect with memory, kindness, and curiosity, they had passed the test Earth never announced, and now the field remained, but it pulsed differently, slowly shifting, not opening yet, but showing signs that Earth was aware, watching and considering, and that gave the galaxy new energy, not of panic, but of patience. And the race that had begun in silence now turned toward reflection, because the universe had learned something simple. Earth's greatest power had never been their technology or knowledge. It had been their way of listening, their gift of presence, and now that they had stepped away, the stars themselves seemed to lean toward them, hoping quietly for a second chance to speak together. Again, the heartbeat signal from Earth echoed for weeks across the stars, steady and calm, and though no words followed, its meaning was clear to those who listened deeply. It was not a message of return or warning, but an invitation to choose, to understand, and to decide what came next without being told. And for many, this was the most difficult part, because the galaxy had grown used to looking toward Earth for answers, for ideas, for help. But now the humans were watching from behind the shimmering shield, quiet and distant, leaving others to ask, what do we become without them? And that question began to stir minds, not just among leaders and scholars, but among the common people, the workers, the farmers, the traders, and the children who had grown up reading human stories and watching their quiet strength. And now, those same stories were being reread with new eyes, revealing lessons that had gone unnoticed before, lessons about choosing kindness over fear, truth over comfort, and courage over control. And across the galaxy, strange things began to happen that pointed towards something deeper at work, like a forgotten mining colony, suddenly discovering a new energy source that matched human theoretical designs, or a malfunctioning AI that began quoting lines from Earth's old poems while fixing itself. And at the center of this growing mystery was Kirill, the scholar who had never stopped believing that humans left clues not in machines, but in meaning. And now he stood inside the Assembly's grand hall, speaking to every world at once, not with charts or codes, but with a story of a species that came from a small blue planet, fragile but curious, alone but hopeful, and who gave everything, not to rule, but to remind others that the universe was wide and full of potential. And as he spoke, the lights in the chamber shifted gently, pulsing with the same rhythm as Earth's signal, as if the galaxy itself was listening. And when he finished, there was silence again. But this time, it was filled with thought. And that was when the choice appeared, not on a screen or a map, but in minds, in dreams, and in moments of quiet. Each person, no matter their species or station, began to feel it, the sense that something had opened, a path forward that could only be walked if taken freely, without demand or reward. And those who stepped onto that path began to notice strange synchronicities, small miracles, a feeling of being aligned with something, unseen, and yet not all were ready. For some still believed Earth owed them answers, and a few groups tried once more to force their way in, building vast machines and sending fleets to orbit Earth's field. But each attempt failed, not with violence but with stillness. Their systems would go dark, their ships drift harmlessly, and then return to full power days later, unchanged except for one thing. All memories of what they had seen during the blackout were gone, and the crews returned haunted, whispering of shadows, light, and a single question they could no longer remember. And this only deepened the mystery, drawing even more attention to the truth Kirill had uncovered. Earth had given the galaxy a choice, and that choice was not about war or peace, but about direction, about becoming something new without being pushed. And as this understanding grew, more species began working together in ways they never had before, sharing knowledge freely, opening borders, and forming new councils not to replace Earth, but to show they had learned from them. And in one quiet corner of the galaxy, a group of children built a replica of Earth's moon using scrap metal and hope, then broadcast their laughter and songs into the void. And to everyone's surprise, the heartbeat signal from Earth changed. It quickened slightly, as if smiling, and then returned to its calm rhythm. And that moment spread faster than any fleet, reminding the galaxy that Earth was still watching, still listening, and still waiting for them to make the final step, not toward Earth, but toward themselves. And it became clear to all who understood that this was never about Earth, leaving out of anger or fear, but about giving others the gift of choice, the rarest and most dangerous power of all. And now that power had been passed to the galaxy, quiet and steady like the heartbeat itself, and what came next would not be written by Earth, but by everyone else together. For the first time in history, the day began like any other in the galaxy, with stars burning quietly, ships moving through trade lanes, and distant worlds waking to their own rhythms. but across every sky, at the exact same moment, a ripple passed. Light twisted softly, like the shimmer on water, and every sensor on every station. Ship and satellite caught it, though no one could explain it. And then Earth's signal, the heartbeat that had pulsed calmly for months, suddenly stopped. Not with a warning, not with a cry, but with a single sound. One soft note, like the ringing of a bell, and then silence deep and total, and for the first time in living memory, the galaxy held its breath as Earth's shimmering barrier began to fade, not crumble or break, but dissolve gently, like mist in morning light, revealing the blue and green world behind it, unchanged but different somehow, glowing softly with energy no one could define, and from the surface 12 beams of light shot into the sky, each one stretching toward a different region of space, and at the end of each beam something waited, a human envoy, standing alone or seated in strange vessels that appeared without warning, not massive warships or golden emissaries, but simple figures dressed in quiet colors, and they did not speak right away, only waited, as if offering the chance to begin with silence. And when the assembly sent messages, the humans answered with gentle smiles and a few words. "We're ready now." "Are you?" And though it confused many, others understood, because over the past months the galaxy had grown, adapted, and changed. And the return of Earth was not a return to control or command, but to connection, and slowly, one world after, another responded, not with speeches, but with actions. A fleet once built for war was dismantled, its parts turned into aid ships. A rivalry that had burned for centuries was ended in a single handshake beneath the stars. And even the Prime Lattice, once ready to force Earth open, sent a public message of apology and thanks. And as these moments unfolded, the human envoys began to walk among the stars again, sharing stories, helping quietly, and listening more than speaking. But the true change was not in what they did. It was in how others responded, not with dependence, but with partnership. And for the first time, humans were not leading, but walking beside, and everywhere they went, something shifted. Not in power or politics, but in feeling, as if hope had found new roots. And in the assembly hall, Kirill stood again, this time not alone, but with a human beside him. And together they spoke of shared futures, of lessons learned, and of paths still unwritten. And then the galaxy saw what Earth had always been preparing for, a world not of rulers and followers, but of equals, each with their own light, their own strength and their own wisdom. And in the years that followed, old maps were redrawn, not with borders, but with bridges, showing connections between species that had once feared one another, and in the center of those bridges stood Earth, quiet, strong, and humble, no longer the thread that held everything together, but the one that reminded everyone how to weave their own patterns. And so it was that the return of Earth did not mark a new rule or empire, but a new age, one where silence was respected, choice was honored, and unity was chosen, not enforced. And while Earth's technology, knowledge, and secrets remained vast, it was their patience, their decision to step away and wait, that became their greatest gift. And in the quiet corners of the galaxy, when children asked why the stars seemed brighter, their elders told them the story of a planet that left, not in anger, but in hope, and came back not as savior, but as friend, and how that return changed everything, not because it was powerful, but because it gave the universe permission to become something better together.